It means building a domestic defense industrial base so we are never hostage to the decisions of others.
In Montreal, a flight simulator company started nearly 80 years ago by a former Air Force officer.
Power no longer belongs only to the countries with the biggest armies. It belongs to the countries that control supply chains, advanced technology, and industrial muscle. And this week, Canada made it clear that it intends to compete at that level. Prime Minister Mark Carney has launched a massive multi-billion-dollar Canada First defense strategy that could reshape the country's military, economy, and global influence for decades. This is not just another procurement plan, it's a structural reset. Billions for domestic production, new defense manufacturing rules, a shift away from automatic reliance on foreign suppliers, and a direct message to allies and competitors alike. Canada will build more of its own security at home. For years, critics argued that Canada underinvested in defense while depending heavily on the United States for military hardware and protection. That model is now being challenged. Under this strategy, Ottawa will prioritize build, partner, buy, meaning Canadian companies come first. If something can be made in Canada, it will be. If not, partnerships with trusted allies come next. Buying outright from foreign suppliers becomes the last option. The plan includes new investment in AI, drones, advanced manufacturing, and critical minerals, all designed to build a modern defense ecosystem. Officials say it could generate up to 125,000 jobs and dramatically increase Canadian defense exports over the next decade. A new defense investment agency will streamline procurement to avoid the delays that have plagued past projects. This isn't just about tanks or jets. It's about sovereignty, industrial resilience, and long-term economic power. In a world where trade rules shift overnight and supply chains become political weapons, Canada is betting that security begins with self-reliance. And that changes everything. The world is changing faster than anyone expected. Global power structures that once depended on geography and alliances are now shaped by industrial strength, technological edge, and economic independence. For decades, Canada relied on partnerships, particularly with the United States, to ensure its defense and national security. But today, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, that reliance is giving way to something bolder, more strategic, and fundamentally transformative. Ottawa has launched an unprecedented multi-billion-dollar defense strategy designed to fortify Canada's military, grow its defense industry, and ensure the country can protect its sovereignty in a world where threats are no longer predictable. At its core, this initiative, officially titled Canada's First Defense Industrial Strategy, marks a historic shift in how Canada approaches security and economic power. Historically, Canadian defense investments have been criticized for being too modest, too slow, and too dependent on foreign suppliers. But that paradigm is now being rewritten. With the new strategy, Ottawa is committing to transform not just the Canadian Armed Forces, but the very industrial base that supports them. Estimates within the plan project more than $500 billion in total investment over the next decade, combining direct defense procurement, related infrastructure spending, and downstream economic activity. The magnitude of this commitment reflects a stark reality. Canada's security environment has evolved dramatically. Threats are not limited to traditional state actors. They encompass cyber warfare, drones, autonomous systems, strategic supply chain disruptions, and contested spaces such as the Arctic. Canada's geography, vast, sparsely populated, and co-located with critical polar passageways, demands a defense apparatus that is capable, resilient, and sovereign. Carney himself put it plainly. The nation can no longer assume that geography or alliances alone will ensure security in an era of rapid technological change and political volatility. At the heart of the strategy is a fundamental shift in procurement philosophy. Gone are the days when Canada would automatically buy off-the-shelf equipment from foreign suppliers. Under the Build, Partner, Buy framework, Ottawa will first look to Canadian firms and domestic production capacity before outsourcing to allies. Where Canada lacks capability but strategic partnerships exist, for example in advanced aerospace or certain naval technologies, joint ventures with trusted allies will be encouraged. Only as a last resort will Canada purchase foreign equipment, and even then with conditions that ensure economic and industrial benefits flow back into the Canadian economy. This new approach is not just about hardware, it is a vision for a defense ecosystem that encompasses research, innovation, manufacturing, workforce development, and exports. Ottawa's plan calls for a new defense investment agency, DIA, which will act as a central hub to streamline procurement, cut red tape, and speed up deliveries to the Canadian Armed Forces. By coordinating across government and industry, the DIA aims to deliver capabilities when they're needed, not years or decades later. One of the most striking elements of the strategy is its emphasis on scaling up domestic innovation. The government is earmarking billions to support research and development, with initiatives targeting frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, autonomous systems, and advanced space capabilities. Programs like the New Drone Innovation Hub and the Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science, Borealis, are designed to accelerate Canadian technological leadership, not only for defense purposes but for commercial spin-offs that benefit the broader economy. Canada's defense industry already contributes significantly to the national economy, employing tens of thousands and generating billions in revenue. The new strategy aims to expand that footprint dramatically. By increasing the share of defense contracts awarded to Canadian companies from roughly half to 70%, Ottawa Project's defense sector revenues could grow by more than 240% over the next decade. At the same time, exports are expected to rise by 50%, helping Canadian firms compete internationally. The plan also projects the creation of up to 125,000 high-paying jobs across the supply chain, from engineers and scientists to skilled tradespeople and technicians. Economic resilience is a central theme of this defense overhaul. Canada's reliance on foreign suppliers, particularly a 70% dependence on U.S. arms manufacturers, has been flagged as a strategic vulnerability. The strategy directly addresses this by prioritizing Buy Canadian policies and strengthening supply chains for critical military components. This is not just industrial nationalism for its own sake, it is a response to real geopolitical shifts, rising protectionism, shifting alliance dynamics, and global competition for technology supremacy. Critically, the strategy does not isolate Canada from its allies. On the contrary, it envisions deeper cooperation with partners such as the European Union, the United Kingdom, and Indo-Pacific nations. By positioning Canadian firms as valued collaborators, Ottawa hopes to expand its influence within allied defense markets while diversifying reliance beyond any single source. This diversification approach is particularly relevant as NATO allies collectively grapple with rising defense commitments and supply chain risks. The strategy also acknowledges the importance of human capital. A Canada Defence Skills Agenda is part of the plan, aimed at expanding the pool of skilled workers available to the defense sector. This includes addressing urgent labor needs, strengthening talent pipelines, and fostering partnerships with provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities, particularly in regions such as the North, where strategic defense considerations intersect with local economic opportunities. One of the most symbolic elements of this strategy is its focus on asserting Canadian sovereignty. Investments in capabilities such as shipbuilding, aerospace, land systems, and digital technologies are meant to ensure that Canada can act independently when necessary, not solely as part of an alliance, but as a nation capable of defending itself. This emphasis on sovereignty also extends to intellectual property protection, with efforts to ensure that technologies developed in Canada remain under Canadian control. In many ways, Ottawa's defense industrial strategy parallels historical periods when countries reoriented their economies around large-scale strategic imperatives. Analysts have compared it to mid-20th century efforts to mobilize industry for national security purposes, a shift in mindset where defense becomes not just a military domain, but an economic engine. While the current strategy is adapted for the 21st century with a focus on technology and innovation, the underlying logic is similar. When security and prosperity are aligned, national resilience increases. Carney's statement launching the strategy was as much about identity as economics. The work of defending Canada, he said, is the work of building Canada. That dual framing, tying defense directly to national prosperity, reflects a broader vision, one where Canada does not simply react to global insecurity, but shapes its own strategic destiny. At a time when global stability is uncertain and traditional alliances face new pressures, Canada's multi-billion-dollar defense strategy represents both a bold gamble and a calculated repositioning. It signals to allies that Canada is ready to contribute at a higher level. It tells domestic industries that defense is now a cornerstone of economic policy. And it sends a message to adversaries that Canada intends to be more than a bystander in a world where power is increasingly defined by economic strength as much as military might. This strategy may well define Canada's security and economic trajectory for decades, not just through the technology it fields or the weapons it builds, but through the industries it fosters, the jobs it creates, and the partnerships it strengthens. It's a new chapter in Canadian defense, ambitious, complex, and unmistakably forward-looking.